Sagt the Mishnah. Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. Eilu Devarim she'adam yaitze ben yedei chivase bePesach. These are the grains that a person will be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah on Pesach. Chitim, bechitim, bese'irim, bekusmin. So you have wheat, barley. Kusmin is spelt. Beshifain is rye. Or beshebayla shual is oats. Why is shebayla shual called? Why is oats called shebayla shual? Rashi says the ears of the oats are similar to the tail of a fox. Shul is a fox. The yaitzin, and you also yaitzin the mitzvah of matzah b'dmai, which is the grain that you get from an amma aretz, and you're not sure if you took off the maisris or not. You could be yaitzin matzah with that. But maiser rishain shenitla trumasai, maiser rishain that a Levi gets, and he has to additionally take off truma that he gives to our kain, and the truma was taken off. Ube maiser sheni, and also maiser sheni or vehektish sheniftu, which were redeemed. V'hakainim b'chala or b'truma. And kainim could be yaitz the mitzvah of matzah using chala or truma to make matzah from it, but only a kain, but not a Yisrael. So the Gemara will explain what's the chiddush in all of these cases, especially when it comes to maiser rishain and maiser sheni, hektish and niftu. Why shouldn't they be allowed to be used? What's the chiddush of the Mishnah? We'll see in the Gemara. Aval loy b'tevel. You can't be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah, not with tevel, produce that the trumas and maises were not taken from it. V'loy b'maiser rishain shalinitra trumasai. And not by a Levi that has his maiser rishain, and he did not separate the truma that he has to give to the kayin. V'loy b'maiser sheni v'hektish shaloi niftu. And not with maiser sheni or hektish that were not redeemed, they cannot be used for matzah. The Gemara will explain the source for this, why not. Rashi brings it here in the Mishnah that says in the Torah, Le'seichel alma olav chometz, shivas yamim teichel olav matzis. What this means is, only something where the only isra that there is chometz could be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah. If there's another reason other than chometz that you can't be eating this for, so then you're not yaitze the mitzvah of matzah. We'll see towards the end of the Amud in the next page. We'll see this inyan. The Mishnah concludes, Chalois ha'toida rekike nazir, the chalois that were prepared for the carbon taida, and or the rekike nazir, the matzahs that were made for the carbon of a nazir. So asan la'atzmai, if he prepared it for a carbon that he was bringing for himself, and Rashi says even if you didn't end up bringing a carbon for yourself, but it was prepared for a carbon that you're bringing for yourself, ein yaitze ben, you can't use it for matzah. Asan limkar b'shok, if you prepared these breads or these rikikim for the nazir, and you were going to sell it for someone else that's going to bring his carbon, so then yaitzim behen, you could be yaitze with it, the mitzvah of matzah. And the Gemara will explain the difference. We'll see in Mitzvah Shem. Zok the Gemara Tane, we learned in Abraise, kusmin min chitin. Kusmin, which is spelled, is a kind of wheat. Shebayla shual v'shifain, both rye and oats, min sa'irin, are a kind of barley. What's the reason why the Gemara is saying this? What's the Braisa teaching me with this? So Rashi here says that the difference, the relevance of what it says here is regarding the halacha of truma. The halacha by truma is that you can't give truma on something which is not the same kind. So kusmin and chitin, so the Braisa is telling you, are this considered to be the same min, the same kind. You can give truma from kusmin on chitin or from chitin on kusmin. And the same thing regarding Shebay Shul, Shifan are both a min sa'irin. There's another nafkamina also when it comes to the mitzvah of matzah itself. By matzah, the mitzvah is, just like every mitzvah, to do it with the most mehudidige grain possible, the best grain possible for the mitzvah of matzah. What's considered to be the best grain to use for matzah? So it says over here, chitim. The Mishnah starts off with chitim. So if you look in the Mishnah, what does the Mishnah say? First chitim, and then it says sa'irim, then it says barley. If you look at the order of the Mishnah, you might think that the order of the Mishnah is actually the order as far as what's considered to be the best, and then the second to best, and the third to best, what you should use for matzah. So therefore the Braisa is clarifying that even though kusmin says in the Mishnah third, kusmin is actually better to use for matzah. Spelt matzah is better than barley matzah. Although I never saw barley matzah, but oat, yes, correct. But kusmin matzah is better than oat matzah because it's a min chitin and therefore it's more mehudah. Chitin is the best matzah; it's the most mehudah matzah to use for the mitzvah. And if you can't use chitim, So then you use kusmin because kusmin is a min chitim. That's the order. And then comes sa'idim, and then comes shabar l'shul and shifal, which are a min sa'idim. So the relevance of this braisa is also for the seder of what grain you should use for the mitzvah of matzah. Then the Gemara says, the Aramaic translation of what these things are, what these grains are. Kusmin is gulba, which is spelt in Aramaic. Shifain is dishra, rye in Aramaic. And shabar l'shul, oat, shvili tala, which is a translation of shabar l'shul. As I mentioned, that the ears of the oats is like the tail of a fox. Okay, now the Gemara is medayik, so we have only these 5 grains. Hani in, only these 5, oides v'doichen loy. That means that we exclude other things that might also be similar to them. Also, you can make flour out of them. Rice or millet, loy, you cannot make matzah out of them. You know, on a milli, from where do I know this? Omer Rab Shimon ben Lakish v'chein tana devei Rabbi Shmuel, v'chein tana devei Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Omakra, the pasuk says, loy soichal olav chametz shivas yomim. Don't eat chametz for 7 days. Again, loy toichal olav chametz. Shivas yomim toichal olav matzahs. 7 days you should eat matzah. What do I learn from the fact that the Torah puts these two things together in the same pasuk? Dvarim haboin lidei chimutz. It's only from grains that could become fermented, it could rise, it becomes chametz. Adam yetze ben yedei chevase b'matzah. They could be used to make matzah out of them. Yatsu elu, which excludes rice and millet, she'ein boin lidei chimutz. If you leave them to rise, that's not called chimutz. It doesn't ferment. It's just spoiling. It doesn't ferment, it doesn't become chametz. Something that can't become chametz is not qualified to be used as matzah. And the like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So what it says here in the Mishnah and in the Braisa that we quoted is not like the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. To Amar, he says, oires min doganhu. Rice is a kind of grain. And this, if it becomes chametz, you would be chayiv on it kares. The Tanya Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, oiser ba'oires v'doichen. We learned in the Braisa, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said that you're not allowed to have oires and doichen on Pesach if they're becoming chametzik, mipnei shekarev lahachmetz, because it's close to becoming chametz. So we see that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri held that when the oires and doichen, flour, or a dough from oires and doichen that rises, that's not spoiling, that is actually considered to be fermenting and becoming chametz. But the Gemara now will clarify what's the meaning of the expression that he says, karev lahachmetz, it's close to becoming chametz. What does that mean? When he says that it's close to becoming chametz, does he mean the kodemu machmetz, that flour, the dough of rice and millet actually becomes chametz quicker than the other grains? So you have to actually be more careful with them. Perhaps he meant karev lahachmetz hava. It doesn't ever become fully chametz. It's close to becoming chametz. It does rise and it's close to chametz, but chametz gomer lo have. It doesn't really fully become chametz. And as Rashi says, what that would mean is that it would be asur to eat min hatayra, but there would be no kares because it doesn't really fully become chametz. So what's the meaning of the word karev lahachmetz? So the Gemara says, Tashema, the Tanya, Rabbi Yochanan said, as the Gemara actually quoted before, Omer Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, oires min doganu, oires, rice is a kind of grain, v'chayavin al chimutze kares. And if it becomes chametz, and therefore you chayav kares, meaning it becomes totally chametz. And therefore you can use this grain, you can use rice to also make matzah out of it. Rabbi Yochanan said this also regarding another kind of a grain. Kromis, chayeves b'chala. It's also chayiv in the mitzvah of chala, which only applies also to these grains. My kromis, what is this kromis? Omer Abaye shitznisa. It's shitznisa. My shitznisa. What is shitznisa? Omer Rav Papa shitznisa de mishtakcha beini kalnisa. Shitznisa is found between its wild grains, or it's Rashi. We have a few pshatim. One pshat Rashi says it's like black, dark millet. Papi. That's what they teach over there. Okay, fine, very good. So this also is considered to be a grain that you could that becomes chametz, and you can make matzah out of it. Omer Abba Baba Chon Omer Ish Lakish Isa Sheni Lusha B'Yayin V'Shemen Udvash, a dough that's kneaded with either wine, oil, or honey. Ein Chayavin Al Chimutza Kares. You're not chayiv if it rises. It's not chametz and there's no kares. Yosef Rav Papa Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yeshua Kamei Rav Vidi Baravin. So these two Amiroim were sitting in front of Rav Vidi Baravin. V'Yosef Ravidi Baravan v'Kamanamnim. Ravidi Baravan himself was sort of dozing off. Amalei Rav Huna Bered Rav Yeshua Rav Papa. So Rav Huna Bered Rav Yeshua says to Rav Papa, "My time of the Rish Lakish." What's the reason for what Rish Lakish said that it's you're not chayiv in it kares? If it's not made with water, it's made with yayin, shemen, or dvash. Why not? Amalei. So he answered him the Amakra, because the pasuk says Lo soichal olav chametz. Right, the pasuk that the Gemara quoted before, right afterwards it says Shivas Yamim Teichel Olav Matzis. So what do we learn from the fact that the Torah says the Isser of Chametz and the Mitzvah of Matzah together? That Dvarim She'adam Yaitze Ben Yidei Chavase B'Matzah, something that you could use to be Yaitze the Mitzvah of Matzah, Chayav Al Chimutze Kares. If that becomes Chametzdik, so then you have Kares for this. But for Ha, when it comes to a dough that's made with wine, oil, or honey, you can't be Yaitzi Yechiv of matzah with this. Why not? The Havyale matzah ashira, because this is what's called wealthy matzah, meaning it's not made with plain water, but it's made with a tasty liquid. It's made with juice or with wine, with oil, honey. So this is called matzah ashira. Ein chayav al chimutz kares. So since you're not Yaitzi the mitzvah of matzah, you're also not going to be chayiv on the kares on the Isser of chametz. So Rashi here brings the pasuk. How do you know that you're not yaitze with matzah shira? Because it says in the Torah lechem oini, bread that has to be bread of a poor individual, meaning it's made with plain water, not with something that has a taste. So from here you learn out that you're not yaitze with matzah shira. That's the reason why Erev Pesach shechali is b'Shabbos. For many people, what they do is you're not supposed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach because it has to be bilat tuyavin. You have to eat the matzah the night at the seder with a special taste that you didn't eat the matzah before. So out of Pesach Shechali is b'Shabbos for someone that doesn't want to eat chametz on that day because he got rid of all of his chametz the day before. Or some people, if they have braces, they're afraid that the matzah, the chametz, if they eat it on that day, can't brush your teeth properly in Shabbos, it can get stuck in your teeth. So what do? You can eat matzah ashira. On out of Pesach, you can eat matzah ashira because that's not something you can be yaitz the mitzvah with. And this is something that Rebbe explains in a Sicha Ba'arichas when they get to this inyan of Matzah Ashira. Why can't you be Yaitze with Matzah Ashira? Because when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, what does it say? How did they leave Mitzrayim? Ki barach ha'am. They had to escape. Why did they have to escape? Because the Tumah that they were involved in was still betokfed. Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, Perek Lamed Aleph, the impurity they were involved in was still very powerful. And therefore they ran out of Mitzrayim, but they were poor, so to speak. Beruchni is in their Aveda. And therefore, we commemorate that by the mitzvah of matzah. It represents the same inyan where a person might still be poor in his Avedis Hashem, but he has Kabbalah soil and he runs and he escapes to do what the Eibishter wants. That's what the matzah represents. So therefore, it has to be dafka lechamayni, but not matzah ashira. Matzah ashira is rich when a person has the revelation of his Avedis Hashem fully revealed in every part of himself, in his seichel and his midas. That's a rich kind of Aveda. That's not the Aveda that the Yidden had when they left Mitzrayim. So therefore it has to be dafka lechamayni, and therefore you also are not over on kares because the Torah compared the two. This is the conversation that Rav Huna Bered, Rav Yeshua, and Rav Papa had in front of Rav Idi Baravin, which was dozing off. So Eisve Rav Huna Bered, Rav Yeshua, Rav Papa. Rav Huna Bered, Rav Yeshua asked Rav Papa about this. How could you say that these two things are dependent on each other? It says in a Braisa, Himcho, if you dissolve the matzah in water, the gomoy, and you swallowed it, you didn't chew the matzah, you just swallowed the whole thing. Im chametzu, if it's chametz, then onush kares. So that there's an einish of kares. In other words, the isser of chametz does apply in eating it in this way, when you dissolve it and just swallow it. Ve'im matzahu, and if it's matzah, ein adam yaitzi dechavase bepesach. You're not going to be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah by dissolving it in water and swallowing it this way. And Rashi says, why not? Lav derech achila ka'achale. This is not the normal way to eat matzah. The normal way to eat matzah is you chew it, you swallow it, you take it and dissolve it in water and just swallow it that way. This is not the regular way of eating it, so you're not yaitze the mitzvah. This goes back to something that we spoke about before when we learned Penegeti Isurim. When it comes to an Isser, you're also not over an Isser if you eat it shalei kederech achila. So according to Rashi, it's the same thing that applies to a mitzvah as well. When you do a mitzvah and you eat it shalei kederech achila, you're not going to be over, you're not going to be yaitze the mitzvah, that is. So now the question is, v'hahacha, so over here you have a clear case, the ein adam yaitze dechavatze b'masa. This that was dissolved in the water and you drink it this way, you're not yaitze the mitzvah of matzah. But yet, v'chayavan achimutze kares. If you do drink it this way and it's chametz, you are going to get the punishment of kares. So how could you say that these two things are dependent on each other? Isser buhu Rav Idi bar Oven. Rav Idi bar Oven was hearing this conversation, and he awakened when he heard this. Amar lahu, and he said to them, Da'ardaki, children, you're saying the wrong reason of why chametz that's needed with yayin, shemen, or dvash, why you're not oivan kares, has nothing to do with the fact that it's dependent on matzah. The reason, hainu time with the Rish Lakish, the reason of Rish Lakish is mishum dahavalahu mei peiris. Using wine or oil or honey, these are mei peiris. This is a category of any juices that any flour that's made, dough that's made with juices, mei peiris ein machmitzin. Juices do not make something chametz. When it rises, that's not chametz. It's maybe you can call it sirchain. What the Gemara said before, it's just spoiling. It's rising. Chametz is only with water, but if it's with mei peiris, ein machmitzin. That's not chametz. There's actually a big machlekes Rishonim about how to learn the pshat on this Gemara here when it says mei peiris ein machmitzin. According to some Rishonim, it means literally that mei peiris is not chametz at all. If you have something that's just mixed with no water at all, just mei peiris, any juices, it's not chametz, and it's not at all. Rashi's opinion, however, is, Rashi doesn't say it here, but Rashi says it later, that you're not going to be over kodesh, because the lashon that the Gemara said before is that you're not chayav kodesh. It is chametz, but not the chametz that you're over kodesh on it. It's not chametz gomor. Chametz gomor, you're chayav kodesh. But it is kodesh to chametz, and therefore there is a lav, even on mei peiris as well. That's Rashi's shitta. And in Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber paskins mei peiris ein machmitzin at all. However, the Ramah over there says, the Alter Rebbe brings this, that nevertheless we're careful even with mei peiris, that you shouldn't use it at all, like Rashi's opinion that says that it is a lav that you over on it. There's also a long Taisus here about it. Taisus more or less agrees to Rashi. There's a few different opinions about this. Going on to the next inyan of the Mishnah. Yaitze b'demai b'maisa v'chulu. So the Mishnah says you can be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah with demai. So the Gemara asks why. Demai, why you yaitze the mitzvah of matzah with demai? Halechazile. It's not fit for him to eat. Mentioned before, as Rashi explained, and the Gemara is going to bring the pasuk at the end of this Amud, only something which is permitted to eat, are you allowed to be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah, but demai, you're not supposed to eat demai without giving meiser again. So how could you be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah with it? And says the Gemara, there are certain individuals that are allowed to eat demai. Who's that? As the Gemara here will say, a person that's poor, has no other food to eat, a guest that you're serving and doesn't have any other food to eat, he's allowed to eat demai. The whole concept of demai is a gzeira of Chazal. And for these individuals, they allow them to eat demai. So therefore the Gemara says, Kivin di iboi mafkele nichse. This individual that's not poor, but he could give up his money and then have a ani. He'll be a poor person, v'oichel demai, and he'll be allowed to eat this demai. So hashtanami chazile. So therefore the gzeira of Chazal does not apply in this case. So Rashi says, since the whole concept of demai is the chumra midrabanan, so therefore, and roiv ami'aret do give meiser, so therefore Chachamim say that you're allowed to use the mitzvah of matzah. You're allowed to use it for the mitzvah of matzah. The Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, machilin esa'aniyim demai, poor people are allowed to eat demai, v'sachsanya demai. Even a person that's not poor, but he's traveling and he doesn't have any food, and you're inviting him as a guest, you can serve him demai as well. Rav Huna said that there's actually a machlekes of Beishamai and Mesil about this. Tana, we learned in the Braisa, Beishamai Yomrim, ein machilin esa'aniyim demai, v'sachsanya demai. That the Isser of demai is for everybody. You can't even give it for a poor person or a person that's a guest. Beisila says that these individuals that don't have what else to eat, you could give them to eat from demai. So therefore you could be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah with demai. The next thing it said in the Mishnah is Ma'aser Rishain shenitla trumasai. The Ma'aser Rishon that a Levi has, and he took off the truma of it. Frag the Gemara, pshita. It's obvious that you could use this for matzah. Why not? It's perfect. It's everything is done right with it. And says the Gemara, no, something was not done exactly right with this. What is this? The kiven shenitla trumasai. It's part of the question. Sorry, yeah. Frag the Gemara, pshita. It's obvious. The kiven shenitla trumasai chulin have. Once the Levi separates the truma that he gives to the kayin, so now it's chulin. So what should be the reason you're not allowed to use it? And says the Gemara, loy tzricha. We need this in the following case. Sheikdimai b'shibalim. While the wheat was still in its kernels, before it was taken out and before it was processed, so then what happened? The Levi went, v'nitla heimeno, he went and took meiser, and v'natla heimeno trumas meiser, but he then separated the truma of this meiser that he took from these shibalim, from these kernels, but v'loy nitla heimeno truma gedayla. The Truma Gedaila that has to be given to the Kayin first was never given. What's the Seder that you give for the Kayin and for the Levi? The first thing is always Truma. After that comes the Maisa for the Levi. Then after that comes Maisa Sheni or Maisa Rani, depends what year it is. But the first thing is always Truma Gedaila that you give to the Kayin. What happened over here is that while it was still in the Shibalim, which is before it's even prepared to be obligated to give the Truma Gedaila, he went and took the Levi went and took the Maisa for himself. Why did the Levi do that? Because he was going to allow the Kayin to take the Truma first. So then that percent of what the Kayin takes, so now the percent of the Maisa of the Levi is going to be less. A Kayin, for example, takes a 50th for his Truma, so now the Levi is going to get less Meiser. So therefore he went and took his Meiser first. And he also separated the Truma of his Meiser for the Kayin. But the Truma Gedaila was never given. So now I would think, since the Truma Gedaila was never given, so therefore you're not allowed to use it. You're not allowed to eat it for matzah either. So that Chiddush over here is, like Rabavoh says, that at this point you don't have to give Truma Gedaila anymore. The Meiser Rishain that you took before when it was still in its kernels, Potter mitruma gedaila. Later on, you don't have to give truma gedaila from it anymore. You only have to give the trumas meiser that's given from every meiser rishain. Shenema, the pasuk says, "V'harei meisem mimenu trumas Hashem meiser mina meiser." There's the truma that you have to give from your meiser, which the Torah calls meiser mina meiser. What do I learn out from this? Meiser mina meiser amarti l'cha. So the trumas meiser is what the Levi has to give. If you took it before the truma gedaila was taken, you don't have to fill that in and also give the truma gedaila that was not taken before. So that's the chiddush of our Mishnah. The Levi took his meiser before the truma was taken. He could use it for matzah, and he doesn't have to give the truma gedaila that was not given before. So now Rav Papa says to Abaye, what did we say before? When did the Levi come and take his meiser rishon? The lashon the Gemara said before was hikdimai b'shibalim. What does a shibalim mean? It was before it was processed. It was still kernels. That's when he came and took his meiser. So Rav Papa said to Abaye, why only then? Ela meyata afilu hikdimai b'kri. How about after it was processed, prepared, and it was made already a pile, and then it was chayiv in the truma gedaila already? Namili potter. Even then, if the Levi came and took his meiser rishon first, you should also be potter of giving truma gedaila. You're bringing here a pasuk that you never have to give truma gedaila from the meiser. So why are you saying only if ikdime b'shibalim, if you took it when it was in its kernels, before it was processed? Amalei, so he answers him, note, there's another pasuk. Alecha omakra, regarding your question, the Torah says, Mikol matnesechem tarimu es kol trumas Hashem. From the matanis that you get, which includes also a Levi that gets his meiser, tarimu es kol trumas Hashem. Why does it say kol? Kol trumas Hashem? Meaning that you have to give the trumas meiser, and if the truma gedaila was not given before, you have to give that as well. And that's referring to this case when it was taken after it was processed already. Says the Gemara, Umar Isa, why are you making this distinction? Why are you saying that if he took his meiser before it was processed, then you don't have to give the truma gedaila? If he took his meiser after it was processed, he does have to give the truma gedaila. Answers the Gemara, very simple. Hi idgen, v'hai loy idgen. Before it was processed, so it was not yet grain, it's not yet prepared to be chayiv b'chlal on the truma gedaila. So therefore, if the Levi took it before, he took it at a time where it wasn't yet b'chlal obligated in the truma gedaila. If you take it later on, if you take it earlier on, again, what was I saying? If you take it in a time when it was not yet chayiv in truma gedaila, so then it's obvious that you don't have to give any meiser. You don't have to give the truma gedaila after you took the meiser. If you took it in a time when it was already roi for the truma gedaila, so then later you are going to have to give the truma gedaila. Okay, so this is the distinction that he's making over here based on the two psukim. Gemara goes on to the next case in the Mishnah. What does it say? Meiser, Sheni, Vehektish, and Niftu. So, l'chayre, it's simple. Pshita. Obviously, you can use it for matzah. Why not? You have Meiser Sheni, you redeemed it, and now it's chulin. Hektish, redeemed, it's chulin. Why can't you use it for matzah? Answers the Gemara, Hacha b'mayaskina, what are we speaking about? Shenosa nesakeren. What happened is it wasn't fully redeemed properly. When you redeem it, you have to give the keren, you have to give the value, the principal, but also an additional fifth. But he gave only the keren. He did not give an added fifth. The kamash malan, the chiddush over here is the ein chaimish ma'akif. That even though you're supposed to give that fifth, but it is not prevented from being fully redeemed, and therefore you can use it for matzah. That was the chiddush of this Mishnah. The next case in the Mishnah is va'kayanim b'chala or b'trumah. The kayanim are allowed to use chala and trumah for their matzah. Only kayanim, but not anybody else. Pshita, again, this is obvious. The kayanim, they're allowed to eat chala and trumah, not anybody else. And says the Gemara, Ma'al detayme matzah shove l'chol adam be'inon. The matzah has to be made from something that anybody is allowed to eat. Chala and trumah, since only a kain is allowed to eat it, so maybe you're not allowed to make matzah from it. Kamash malon, matzahis riba. The Torah says matzahis twice to tell me that you can make matzah even from something that not everybody could eat, only kainim can eat from it. Avaloi betevel. Then the Mishnah says you can't make matzah of produce that the trumas and maisas were not taken from it. Tevel. Pshita, this is also obvious. Answers the Gemara, leitzriche betevel tovel midrabanan. We're talking about something where the obligation of trumas and maisas was only midrabanan. What is that case? Shezaroi ba'otzit she'ein nokov. When you have something that's planted in a flower pot, in a flower pot that does not have any holes in it, so over here, min ha'Torah, there's no obligation of trumas and maisas. So even though it's only chayiv midrabanan, you're not allowed to use it for matzah. The next case in the Mishnah was v'loi b'maiser rishayin shaloi nitra tumasai. You're not allowed to use maiser rishayin that the truma was not taken from it yet. Pshita, it's also obvious, it wasn't taken yet, so you're not allowed to eat it. And it says the Gemara leitzriche sheik dimai b'kri. So this goes back to what we said before. When it says loi nitla trumasai, it's not referring to the trumas maiser. It's referring to the truma gedoyla. What happened is that when Levi came and took it, b'kri, he took his meiser after it was already processed and it was placed in a pile. Here the Levi came and took his meiser first. So Mao the time Rav Papa la Abaye, I would think like Rav Papa suggested before Tabaye. What did Rav Papa say to Abaye? That even in such a case, you don't have to take the Truma Gedayla. Kamash Malon Kiddushani lay. So the Mishnah here is teaching me like he answered him. What did he answer him before? That you do have to take Truma Gedayla in this case. Only when the Levi came and took his meiser from the shibalim, then you don't have to take Truma Gedayla. But over here, because it was already in a pile after it was processed, you do have to take the Truma Gedayla, and that's what the Mishnah meant when it said Loi nitla trumasai, referring to Truma Gedayla that was not taken. V'loi b'meiser sheni v'hektish shaloi niftu. You can't be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah with meiser sheni or hektish that were not redeemed. Pshita, it's obvious, so you're not allowed to eat them. And it says the Gemara, la oilam de niftu. Really, the Mishnah is speaking about a case of meiser sheni and hektish that were redeemed. My loy niftu. What does it mean when the Mishnah says loy niftu? Shalei niftu kehilchasan. They weren't redeemed properly. Meiser sheni, regarding meiser sheni, what does it mean it wasn't redeemed properly? Shapadoi al gav asimain. He redeemed the meiser sheni with an unminted coin. A coin that doesn't have a picture on it, the way it's minted. The Rachmana Amar, the Pasuk says, V'tzarta ha-kesef. The simple meaning of the word V'tzarta ha-kesef means you tie it. You tie the money in a bundle. But the Gemara Darshans, Dava sheyesh leitzura. You could only redeem your meiser sheni with a coin, a properly minted coin that has a picture on it. So over here, he redeemed it not in the proper way. And therefore, that's the chiddush that he can't use it for matzah. The hektish, shechiloloi al gabe karka, and regarding hektish, we're talking about a case that it was also not redeemed properly. He redeemed it through giving the hektish a piece of land. And that doesn't work. The Rachmana Amar v'nosan ha-kesef ekamloi. You could only redeem your hektish with a movable object. Either money or any other movable object, not with land. And that's the case that happened there, and that's the chiddush of our Mishnah, that it can't be used for matzah. Tana Rabbana. Now here the Gemara finally brings the pasuk, the source, why something that's not permitted to eat can't be used for matzah as well. Obviously, l'chatchila, you're not allowed to eat it, but even b'di'eved, if he used it for matzah, he's not going to be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah with it. Tana Rabbana, we learned in Abraisa, Yochel, I would think, yaitze adam yidei chayvasa, that a person would be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah, b'tevel shaloi niskan, with tevel that has not been done properly, that's not been fixed, it's not been taken care of properly. So I would think you yaitze the mitzvah of matzah. So the Gemara interjects and explains, Kol tevel nami hole niskan. Why does it say the tevel that's not fixed, that's not, you didn't take the maisras off properly? That's every tevel. What is tevel? Tevel is that you didn't take off the maisras. And says the Gemara, Elo, what it means is, betevel shole niskan kol tzarkai. If you have produce and you didn't take off all the trumas and maisras necessary, even if you did take off part of them, shenitla mimena truma gedayla, you did separate the truma gedayla, but v'loy nitla mimena trumas meiser. You did not take from that truma gedayla the truma of the meiser, or you did not take the truma of the meiser that's from the meiser of the Levi. Meiser Rishon, you took off the Meiser Rishon, that is, v'loy Meiser Sheni, but you didn't separate Meiser Sheni. V'afila Meiser Ani, or even if you just missed Meiser Ani. So that's why he's saying the tevel that's not fully done. You took off part of the Turmis and Meisers, but not all of it. So how do I know you're not Yaitze the mitzvah of matzah through tevel? Talmud Laim, the pasuk says, Lo Soichalol of Chometz. So and right afterwards it says the mitzvah of matzah. Mi she'isurai mishum bal teichalol of chometz. If it's a grain, if it's something that the only isser that is on this would be the isser of chometz, then you could be yaitze with it the mitzvah of matzah. Yatza zeh she'ein isurai mishum bal teichal chometz. Over here in the produce which is tevel, there's no isser of bal teichalol of chometz. Ela mishum bal teichal tevel. Over here the only isser is not to eat it because it's tevel. The Torah is saying only if it's something that the Isser is not to eat it because it's chametz, then you yaitze the mitzvah of matzah. Fragt the Gemara, the Isura the chametz lahechan ozla. Where did the Isser of chametz go to? Even if you're telling me that you're over the Isser of tevel, but there's also an Isser of chametz as well. There's both together. So you should still be able to yaitze the mitzvah of matzah. Rav Sheishes Hamani Rav Shimon he. This brayse is the opinion of Rav Shimon. The Amar Rav Shimon says, Ein Isser chal al Isser. One Isser does not take effect on another Isser. If we're talking about grains that are produce, that does not separate any of the Trumas and Maestros, so didn't fully separate the Trumas and Maestros, and it's still Tevel, the Isser of Chametz will not take effect on this. It's only going to be the Isser of Tevel, and therefore you can't be Yaitze, the mitzvah of Matzah. The Tanya, we learned in the Braise, Rab Shimon says, Ha'oichel nevele b'yoyim ha'kippurim. A person that eats an avela on Yom Kippur, and Rashi says we're talking about a shegig, Potter, he does not bring a carbon chatos. Why not? Because since it's an avela before Yom Kippur, the Isser of nevela is there in advance. So the Isser of Yom Kippur does not take effect. One Isser cannot be chal on another Isser. And that's what the Braisa meant before as well. If it's Tevel, there's no Isser of Chametz that takes effect on it. Right, in the chametz itself, true. Okay, there's a thesis over here. Okay. Ravina says, Afila Teimer Rabbanon, that we could even say that the Braisa before follows the opinion of the Rabbanon that the Isser of chametz will be chal on the Tevel. Mi she'isurai, the way you have to read the drasha is as follows. Mi she'isurai mishum bal teichal chametz bilvad. If the only Isser that there is on this is the Isser of chametz, then you could be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah with it. Yatza zeh, which excludes the case of tevel, she'ein isurai mishum bal teichal chametz bilvad. It's not the only isser is not chametz, ela af mishum bal teichal tevel. You have both the isser of chametz and the isser of tevel, therefore you can't be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah. That's the pshat in the brayso. But really, there's both isurim at the same time. So the Gemara midi bilvad ksiv. Does it say in the pasuk bilvad? It doesn't say in the Torah bilvad. So how do you know to make the drasha this way, that there can't be any other isser on it, and then it disqualifies it from the mitzvah of matzah? Ella machvartik the Rav Sheishes, the best pshat is, like we said before from Rav Sheishes, that brayso follows Rav Shimon's opinion. Ein isser chal al isser, if there's an isser of tevel, there's no isser of chametz. So therefore you're not yaitze if there's an isser of tevel. There's a famous question that the Rishonim ask in this Gemara, why do you need a special pasuk to teach me that you're not yaitze the mitzvah of matzah with tevel? We know that there's a famous rule that the mitzvah haba ba'aveda, you're not yaitze the mitzvah. Eating tevel is doing an aveda. So if you're eating tevel while you're eating the matzah is tevel, it's a mitzvah ba ba'aveda. How could you be yaitze the mitzvah? It's a shayla that the Rishonim ask. Some Rishonim say that from here is a raya that the whole concept of mitzvah ba ba'aveda is only by a carbon. But most Rishonim disagree with this. You find mitzvah ba ba'aveda by other mitzvahs as well, by lulav, all kinds of other mitzvahs. It's brought by tefillin, by lulav. The Alter Rebbe brings in a Shulchan Aruch. Other Rishonim say that when you have tevel and matzah, and you're eating the matzah that happens to be tevel, the mitzvah and the aveda are not, the mitzvah is not causing the aveda. The concept of mitzvah ba aveda is only if your mitzvah causes the aveda. For example, a lulav agazel. So when you have a stolen lulav, so you're not allowed, it's not yours to use. You're not allowed to touch it. You're not allowed to use it. The fulfillment of the mitzvah is causing the gzela, that you're using something which is not yours. Mashenkin over here, this is tevel. Right? The mitzvah is not adding or bringing the aveda b'chlal. Right? You're eating the matzah, and it happens to also be tevel at the same time. You didn't give the trumas and the meisters. It's tevel. It's not causing it. The mitzvah is not making the aveda, so therefore you're not going to be. It's not included in the mitzvah of aveda. Okay, but it needs more of a hezbollah. That's a famous question that's asked in this Gemara there. Yishleim speak about this. Okay.